The first time Alden Whitmore saw the orc girl crying, he thought it was just rain on her face until he noticed her shoulders shaking. She stood at the end of the wooden dock where his ferry tied up each evening, staring out across the Grey Run River as water streamed from the sky. Her green skin looked darker when wet, almost like river moss, and her small tusks caught the fading light. She was tiny for an orc, barely reaching his shoulder, with a build more suited to a seamstress than a warrior. Most humans at the crossing gave orcs a wide berth, but she came every few days with a canvas sack of vegetables to trade at the market on the south bank. Alden secured the ferry's mooring rope and wiped rain from his eyes. The girl had her face tilted up to the clouds, and even from 20 feet away he could see her crying. Not sobbing, just silent tears mixing with the downpour. He considered saying something. Then he considered minding his own business. The war had ended 3 years ago, but plenty of folks still saw orcs as the enemy. Getting involved with one, even to offer comfort, could stir up trouble he did not need. So he gathered his things and headed up the path toward his cottage, leaving her alone in the rain. The second time was a week later. Same gray clouds, same position at the end of the dock. This time Alden paused with his hand on the ferry's tiller and watched her more carefully. She stood perfectly still except for the trembling in her shoulders, face turned skyward, letting the rain wash over her. When the shower passed and weak sunlight broke through, she wiped her face quickly, picked up her sack, and walked away as if nothing had happened. The third time, Alden began to see the pattern. She only cried when it rained. Never on clear days, never under clouds that merely threatened. Only when water actually fell from the sky did she let herself weep. It took him another 2 weeks to understand why. He was helping old Maren load flour sacks onto the ferry when the merchant nodded toward the orc girl crossing the gangplank. She kept her eyes down, moving quickly. "Strange creature," Maren muttered. "Never seen an orc so small. You think she is sick?" "She seems healthy enough," Alden said neutrally. "They say orcs do not cry, something about shame or weakness or some such." Maren spat into the river. "Maybe the little ones are different." Alden said nothing, but the comment lodged in his mind. That evening, when rain began to fall and he saw her walking toward the dock, he understood. She was not crying in the rain by coincidence. She was crying in the rain so no one could tell. So she could pretend the water on her face came only from the clouds, so it would not count. Something in his chest twisted at the thought. He knew about hiding pain. 5 years on this ferry, moving people and goods across the Grey Run, and he had learned that everyone carried something they did not want others to see. But to plan your grief around the weather, to wait for storms to give yourself permission to feel, that struck him as desperately lonely. He did not approach her that day either. But he started paying closer attention. Her name, he learned from the market vendors, was Wren Blacktusk. She lived somewhere in the northern woods with her mother, growing vegetables and herbs. She was quiet, paid fairly, and never caused trouble. The vendors tolerated her because her produce was good and she asked for reasonable trades. More than that, no one seemed to know. Wren came to the ferry crossing every 5 or 6 days, always with her canvas sack, always alone. On clear days, she moved with calm efficiency, trading her goods and returning north before sunset. On rainy days, she lingered at the dock, face turned up to the sky, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Alden began to recognize the signs. The way she would glance at the clouds as she approached, the subtle slump in her posture when she realized the sky would stay clear, the almost relieved look when thunder rumbled in the distance. He wondered what she was grieving. A lost family member. A broken heart. Simple loneliness. He had no way to know, and asking felt like an intrusion. But watching her cry alone in the rain, week after week, began to feel like a different kind of intrusion, like bearing witness to something private without permission, without offering anything in return. So one evening in early autumn, when dark clouds gathered and Wren appeared on the northern bank waiting for passage, Alden made a decision. He rowed the ferry across, took her coin, and said nothing as she stepped aboard. The first drops began to fall halfway across the river. By the time they reached the southern dock, rain poured from the sky in sheets. Wren did not disembark immediately. She stood at the railing, face lifted, and Alden saw her throat work as she swallowed. Then the tears came, sliding down her green cheeks, lost almost instantly in the rain. Alden reached into the storage box under his bench and pulled out an old umbrella. His father had left him two when he died, both sturdy oiled canvas on oak frames. Alden had never needed both at once. He opened the umbrella with a soft snap and held it over Wren's head. She startled, eyes flying open. For a moment she just stared at him, rain suddenly absent from her face, tears visible and unmistakable on her cheeks. I should go," she stammered, moving toward the gangplank. "Safe crossing," Alden said, keeping his voice even. Not quite meeting her eyes, giving her space to flee with dignity, she hurried away into the market, leaving wet footprints on the wood. Alden collapsed the umbrella and stored it carefully. His heart beat faster than rowing ever made it. He was not sure what he had just done or why, but it felt important. The rain continued into the evening. When it finally stopped, the world smelled clean and new. 3 days later, Wren returned under clear skies. She avoided looking at Alden as she paid for passage, and he did not force conversation. They crossed in silence, but when she disembarked on the southern bank, she turned back briefly. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for the umbrella." "You are welcome," Alden replied. She nodded once and walked away. It was not much, but it was something. Over the following weeks, their interactions remained minimal. Wren paid, Alden ferried. They exchanged occasional pleasantries about the weather or the river's current. She did not linger at the dock on clear days. On the 2 rainy days when she crossed, Alden kept the umbrella stored. He had made his gesture. Pushing further felt like pressure she did not need, but the second umbrella stayed in the storage box, waiting. Autumn deepened into colder rains and early frosts. The gray run ran faster with mountain snowmelt, making each crossing harder work. Alden's shoulders ached by evening, but he liked the fatigue. It kept him from thinking too much about the approaching winter and what it might bring. Then one gray afternoon, a rider came down the southern road wearing the king's colors. Alden's stomach sank even before the man dismounted at the dock. "Alden Whitmore," the rider called. "That is me." The rider held out a sealed letter. "Conscription notice. The Crown is requisitioning ferry operators for the Eastern River Campaign. You are to report to the garrison at Milford within 30 days to receive your assignment." Alden took the letter with numb fingers. "There is a campaign. I thought the war was over." "Border skirmishes with the eastern clans. They need experienced river men to move supplies and troops." The rider's voice was bored, as if he had delivered this speech 100 times already. "Failure to report is desertion. Penalty is hanging." "How long is the service?" "Minimum 1 year. Could be longer depending on how things develop." The rider swung back onto his horse. 30 days. Do not be late." He rode off, leaving Alden standing on the dock with the letter in his hand and ice forming in his gut. 1 year. Possibly more. Leaving the crossing, leaving his cottage, leaving everything he had built here. And for what? To ferry soldiers and weapons for some territorial dispute he barely understood, but desertion meant death. That part was clear enough. He opened the letter and read the formal language confirming what the writer had said. Report within 30 days. Bring nothing but basic clothing and tools. Payment would be soldiers' wages, a fraction of what he made from the ferry. His property would be held in trust until his return. If he returned, Alden folded the letter and shoved it in his pocket. His hands were shaking. He needed to think, but the ferry bell was ringing. Someone wanted passage. He looked up and saw Wren waiting on the southern bank, her canvas sack beside her. For a moment he considered waving her off, claiming the ferry was closed. Then he shook himself, climbed into the boat, and began to row. The crossing took 10 minutes. Wren stood quietly at the bow, watching the water. When they reached the northern side, she paid her coin and turned to go. "Wren," Alden said, surprising himself. She paused. Yes. He wanted to tell her about the letter. He wanted to explain that he might be leaving, that their strange, unspoken connection might be ending before it ever became anything real. But what right did he have to burden her with that? They barely knew each other. "Be careful on the northern road," he said instead. "I heard there are wolves coming down from the high country." Her dark eyes studied him for a moment. "I will be careful, thank you." She walked away, and Alden cursed himself for a coward. That night he sat in his cottage and read the letter 5 more times. 30 days. He had 30 days to figure out what to do. The easiest path was to report as ordered. Serve his time, hope he survived, come back and reclaim his ferry. Thousands of men did it. The Crown had the right to conscript in times of need, but this did not feel like genuine need. This felt like lords playing at territory and power, using common men as game pieces. Alden had already given 3 years to the war when he was younger. He had seen friends die in pointless skirmishes over villages no one remembered the names of afterward. He had pulled bodies from rivers and watched good men break under the weight of things they had been ordered to do. He did not want to go back to that. He especially did not want to leave just when something fragile and new was beginning to grow here. Something with a small orc girl who cried only in the rain. Over the next week, Alden asked careful questions of the travelers who used the ferry. What did they know about the river campaign? How long might it really last? Were there any ways to avoid conscription? The answers were not encouraging. The campaign was real and growing. Men who tried to dodge the draft were hunted down and made examples of. The only legal exception was if you could provide a qualified replacement or pay a substantial exemption fee. A replacement meant finding another experienced ferryman willing to take your place. The exemption fee was 200 gold crowns, more money than Alden had seen in 5 years. He had about 60 crowns saved. Nowhere near enough. 6 days after receiving the letter, rain returned to the valley. Heavy gray curtains of water that turned the river choppy and the dock slick. Alden worked through the afternoon, ferrying nervous travelers who clutched their belongings and eyed the swollen current. As evening approached, Wren appeared on the southern bank. Alden rowed across, and she climbed aboard without a word. Halfway back to the northern side, with rain hammering down around them, she moved to the railing. Her face tilted up. Her shoulders began to shake. Alden secured the oars and reached into the storage box. He pulled out both umbrellas. He opened the first over his own head. Then he opened the second and stepped beside Wren, holding it carefully above her. The rain stopped falling on her face. Her tears continued, now completely visible. Undeniable. She did not pull away. She just stood there, crying openly for the first time since he had known her, protected from the rain that usually hid her grief. They stayed that way until the ferry bumped against the northern dock. Then Wren wiped her face with both hands and looked at him directly. "Why do you do this?" she asked. Her voice was rough from crying. Because you should not have to wait for storms, Alden said quietly. You do not know anything about me. I know you come here every few days. I know you are kind to the vendors even when they barely tolerate you. I know you cry like your heart is breaking and you try to hide it. He paused. I know what it feels like to carry something heavy alone. Wren's jaw tightened. Orcs are not supposed to cry. It is seen as weakness, proof that we are not strong enough to survive. That is a cruel teaching. Perhaps, but it is what I was taught. She looked down at her hands. My father left when I was small. He said my mother had made me too soft, too human, that I dishonored our clan by being weak. So I learned not to cry where anyone could see, and then I learned that rain made good cover. Alden's chest ached. I am sorry. It is old pain. She met his eyes again. But you keep forcing me to feel it in the open. Why? Because hiding in the rain did not seem to be helping. He lowered the umbrella slightly. Because you deserve to cry in the sunlight if you need to. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, a small smile tugged at her mouth. You are persistent, so I have been told. I should go. My mother worries if I am late. But she did not move immediately. Will you be at the crossing tomorrow? I will be here, Alden said. Then, because time was running out and cowardice was getting him nowhere, he added, for the next few weeks at least. Her smile faded. What happens in a few weeks? So he told her about the letter. About the conscription and the river campaign and the impossible choice between desertion and leaving. The words came easier than he expected, perhaps because the rain gave him the same cover it gave her. When he finished, Wren was quiet for a long time. Could you not pay the exemption? She asked finally. I do not have that kind of money. Could you find a replacement? There are not many ferrymen willing to take another man's conscription. It would mean they could not be called up themselves, and most prefer to keep their options open. Alden collapsed the umbrellas and secured them. I have been asking, no luck so far. How much time do you have? 3 weeks and 2 days. Wren chewed her lower lip, a gesture that made her look very young. That is not long. No, I do not want you to go. The words came out rushed, as if she had to say them before her courage failed. I know we hardly know each other. I know I have no right to ask you to stay, but I do not want you to go. Something warm and painful expanded in Alden's chest. I do not want to go either. They stood looking at each other in the rain. Two people barely more than strangers, connected by nothing more substantial than umbrellas and unspoken grief. It should not have been enough to matter, but somehow it was. I will think of something, Wren said. There must be a way. Wren, you cannot, this is not your problem to solve. You carried 2 umbrellas for me. Her voice was firm. Let me try to help. She left before he could argue further, disappearing into the rainy dusk with her canvas sack. Alden rowed the ferry back to its mooring and secured it for the night. His mind spun with the conversation, with Wren's declaration that she did not want him to leave. It was more than he had hoped for. It was also complicated and frightening and possibly doomed, but it mattered. She mattered. He just needed to find a way to stay. Over the next few days, Alden expanded his search for solutions. He talked to river wardens, asking if there were any petitions or appeals that could delay conscription. He inquired at the garrison about the exact rules for exemptions and replacements. He even considered selling the ferry itself, though that would leave him with no livelihood even if he managed to avoid the campaign. Nothing worked. The rules were clear and inflexible. Money or a replacement. Those were the only options. Wren came to the crossing 3 times in that week. Each time she asked if he had found a solution. Each time he had to say no. But they talked more now, awkward conversations that circled around their strange situation and occasionally landed on something real. He learned that her mother was sick, that Wren grew herbs and vegetables to trade for medicine. He learned that she had tried to leave the valley once, seeking acceptance in the south, but had found only worse prejudice. He learned that she loved the river, that she came to the crossing as much for the water as for the trading. She learned that he had inherited the ferry from his father, that he had served in the war and hated it, that he valued peace and routine above nearly everything else. She learned that he had no family left, that the crossing was his entire world. "That sounds lonely," she said one afternoon. "It was," Alden agreed, "until recently." She ducked her head, but he saw her smile. On a clear, cold day 12 days before his conscription deadline, Wren arrived at the crossing with her usual canvas sack and something else, a leather pouch that clinked when she set it down. "What is that?" Alden asked. 40 crowns. Her voice was matter of fact. "From selling my mother's jewelry and some other things. It is not enough, but it is a start." Alden stared at her. "Wren, no, I cannot take your money. You are not taking it, I am giving it." She crossed her arms. "You need 200 crowns for the exemption. I have 40. You said you have 60. That leaves 100 to find. That is still an impossible amount, perhaps, but it is less impossible than 200. She stepped closer. "Let me help, Alden, please." He wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that this was too much, that she barely knew him, that he could not let her sacrifice for him this way. But the truth was simpler and harder. He wanted to stay. And he wanted to let her help because it meant she wanted him to stay too. 100 crowns in 12 days, he said quietly. "That is still going to be nearly impossible. Then we had better start thinking creatively." They sat together on the dock and made a plan. Alden would double his ferry hours, running through the night if necessary to catch late travelers. He would offer premium rates for urgent crossings. Wren would talk to the herb merchants about selling her entire autumn stock at once, even at a discount. She would ask her mother if there was anything else they could spare. It was desperate and unlikely to work, but it was something. That night, Alden ran the ferry until midnight, ferrying merchants who paid extra to cross in darkness. He made 3 crowns. It was not nearly enough, but it was a start. The next morning, Wren returned with news that a merchant would buy her entire stock of medicinal herbs for 15 crowns. Less than she would have made trading them slowly, but immediate money. She handed the coins to Alden with a determined expression. 55 crowns to go, she said. Alden's throat tightened. "You are going to exhaust yourself for this." "You carried 2 umbrellas, she said simply. "This is what I can carry for you." Over the following days, they both worked harder than was sustainable. Alden ferried dawn to midnight, sometimes beyond. His shoulders burned and his hands blistered. Wren stripped her garden bare and sold everything. She took odd jobs in the market, carrying water and cleaning stalls for a few extra coins. The pile of money grew slowly. 70 crowns. 85. 90. With 5 days left, they sat together on the dock counting what they had. 142 crowns. Still 58 short of the exemption fee. "We are not going to make it," Alden said quietly. "We still have 5 days. Wren, we have sold everything. I am running the ferry every possible hour. There is nothing left to do." She set her jaw stubbornly. "There is always something." But the hope in her voice was fading, and they both knew it. That night, Alden lay awake in his cottage and faced the truth. He was going to have to report to Milford. He was going to leave the crossing, leave Wren, leave the fragile thing they had started to build together. A year at minimum. Possibly longer. The thought made him sick. But what choice did he have? Desertion was death. Even if he ran, where would he go? And what kind of life would he have, always looking over his shoulder, always waiting for the king's men to find him? He could not do that to himself. He could not do that to Wren. making her a fugitive's companion. The next morning he was preparing the ferry when old Wren appeared at the dock. "Heard you have been trying to buy your way out of the conscription," the merchant said without preamble. Alden saw no point in denying it. "Yes. But I am short of the fee." "How much short?" 58 crowns, Wren grunted. "That is a fair sum." "It is." Alden secured a rope, not looking at the merchant. "If you came to gloat, I am not in the mood. I came to make you an offer." Wren pulled out a purse. "I will lend you the 58 crowns. You pay me back over the next 2 years at 1 crown per week, plus 10% interest." Alden froze. "Why would you do that?" "Because you are a good ferryman and I use this crossing regularly." "Because the last conscription took away 3 ferries in this valley, and it was a damned inconvenience for 2 years." Wren shrugged. "And because that little orc girl who works so hard for you reminded me of my daughter, stubborn as hell and loyal past common sense." "You have a daughter." "Had. She died in the war, plague in one of the camps." Wren's voice was gruff. "She would have done what that orc girl is doing for you, moving mountains to save someone she cared about. I could not help my girl. Maybe I can help yours." Alden's eyes stung. "I will pay you back, every coin." "You had better. I am not running a charity." But Wren's voice was almost kind as he handed over the purse. "Now go file your petition with the river warden before you run out of time, and maybe thank that orc girl properly while you are at it." Alden wanted to hug the old merchant. He settled for shaking his hand firmly. "Thank you. Get moving." Alden grabbed his coat and ran toward the river warden's office in the village, clutching the purse like his life depended on it. Because it did. The warden was a tired-looking man named Gareth who listened to Alden's petition with bored patience. "You have the full exemption fee?" Gareth asked. "Yes." Alden counted out 200 crowns on the desk. "And you understand this exempts you only from this specific conscription. If there is another call-up in the future, you can still be drafted." "I understand. You also need to provide evidence that the ferry will continue operating in your absence if you were to be called again. Do you have someone who can take over?" Alden hesitated. "I can find someone." "You need a name and documentation now." Gareth pushed a form across the desk. "A signed agreement from someone qualified to run the ferry if you were conscripted in the future." "But I am paying the exemption. I am not being conscripted. For this campaign." "The law requires that all exempted ferry operators maintain a documented replacement in case of future need." Gareth looked almost sympathetic. "It is a new rule. Came down from the capital last month. Ensures the Crown can still access river transport if necessary." Alden's stomach sank. "How long do I have to provide this?" "The documentation must be filed with your exemption. So now." Gareth tapped the form. "I can hold your fee for 3 days while you find someone. After that, the exemption is void and you report as originally ordered. 3 days." He had to find a qualified ferryman willing to sign as his replacement in 3 days. Alden left the office with his head spinning. The money was no longer enough. He needed someone willing to commit to running his ferry if he was ever conscripted again. Someone skilled enough to handle the Grey Run's currents. Someone the warden would approve. He spent the rest of the day asking every river worker he knew. The answers were all the same. No one wanted to sign away their freedom like that. If they agreed to be his replacement, they would be locked in. Unable to refuse if called. It was too much risk. By evening, Alden was back at the ferry dock, exhausted and desperate. He had 3 days. 3 days to find the impossible or lose everything. Wren arrived just before sunset. She took one look at his face and said, "What happened?" He explained about the replacement requirement, about the 3-day deadline, about the impossible search for someone willing to sign the agreement. When he finished, Wren was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Teach me." "What? Teach me to run the ferry. I will be your replacement." Alden shook his head immediately. "Wren, no, you cannot." "Why not?" Because you are not a ferryman, because the warden would never approve an orc, because it is dangerous work and you could get hurt." He ran his hand through his hair. "Because I am not going to put you in that position." "You are not putting me anywhere. I am volunteering." She stepped closer. "You said yourself the warden needs a qualified person. I can become qualified. You have 3 days. Teach me everything you can in 3 days and then take me to the warden. He will say no. Perhaps. But what do you lose by trying?" Her dark eyes were fierce. "I am not going to stand by and watch you leave because of bureaucratic nonsense. Teach me to run the ferry, Alden. Let me be your replacement." He wanted to argue more, but the truth was he was out of options, and Wren was right. What did he lose by trying? "The Grey Run is a dangerous river," he said quietly. "Strong current, hidden rocks, unpredictable weather. People have drowned here. Then you had better be a good teacher." Despite everything, Alden almost smiled. "You are the most stubborn person I have ever met." "Good. You will need stubborn if this is going to work." She rolled up her sleeves. "When do we start?" "Now." They worked through the evening and into the night. Alden taught Wren how to read the river's current, how to angle the ferry to compensate for flow, how to watch for debris and adjust course. She was a quick learner, focused and determined. Her small size was actually an advantage. She was light enough that the ferry rode higher in the water, making it easier to maneuver. By midnight, she could manage a basic crossing in calm water. Not perfect, but competent. They slept a few hours and started again at dawn. Alden took her through rough water, teaching her how to handle the ferry when the Grey Run was choppy and difficult. She struggled at first, but her determination was absolute. She would not quit. Old Marin crossed mid-morning and watched Wren manage the ferry with quiet approval. "She is good," he told Alden. "Not as strong as you, but smart. She feels the river instead of fighting it." "Will the warden accept her?" Marin shrugged. "Gareth is a bureaucrat. If she demonstrates competence and you argue your case well, he might. He is also lazy." "If accepting her means less paperwork, that works in your favor." It was not exactly reassuring, but it was something. They trained through the 2nd day and into the 3rd. By the final evening, Wren could handle the ferry in most conditions. She knew the river's moods, the dangerous spots, the best crossing angles. She was not as experienced as Alden, but she was competent. Legitimately competent. "Tomorrow we go to the warden," Alden said as they secured the ferry for the night. Wren nodded. Her hands were blistered from the oars and she moved with the careful stiffness of someone whose muscles were screaming, but her expression was determined. "Thank you," Alden said, "for all of this, for everything." "You carried 2 umbrellas," Wren said again. "This is just carrying back." They stood together in the darkness, the river rushing past, the future balanced on a knife's edge. "If he says no tomorrow," Wren said quietly, "what will you do?" "I do not know." Alden looked at her. Really looked at her, this small, fierce orc girl who had appended his life with her hidden tears and stubborn loyalty. "But whatever happens, I want you to know that these weeks have mattered. You matter." She reached out and took his hand. Her palm was rough against his, calloused from the oars. "You matter to me too." They held hands in the darkness, not quite ready to name what was growing between them but unable to deny it existed. The next morning, they walked together to the river warden's office. Alden carried the documentation, his exemption fee, and a knot of anxiety in his stomach. Wren walked beside him, quiet but present. Gareth looked up when they entered and his eyebrows rose at the sight of Wren. "This is your replacement?" he asked skeptically. "Her name is Wren Blacktusk," Alden said. She has been training with me for 3 days. She knows the river and can handle the ferry. She is an orc. She is qualified. Alden kept his voice steady. Take her out on the river, test her, you will see. Gareth looked between them, clearly annoyed at this complication. This is highly irregular. The law says I need a qualified replacement. It does not specify species. Alden placed the documentation on the desk. Test her abilities. If she fails, I will accept that, but give her a fair chance. The warden drummed his fingers on the desk, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. Fine. We go to the river. She demonstrates competence to my satisfaction, or this petition is denied. Understood, understood. They walked to the ferry dock, Gareth complaining the entire way about bureaucracy and complications. At the river, he gestured curtly at the ferry. Show me a crossing. South bank and back. Wren climbed into the ferry without hesitation. Alden moved to join her, but Gareth held up a hand. Alone. If she is going to be your replacement, she needs to manage independently. Alden's heart hammered, but he nodded. Wren met his eyes across the dock, and he tried to communicate confidence he did not quite feel. She untied the mooring and pushed off. Her first strokes were smooth, angling the ferry into the current exactly as Alden had taught her. She read the water well, adjusting her course to avoid a submerged rock that only experienced river workers would notice. Gareth watched in silence. Alden barely breathed. The crossing to the south bank took 8 minutes. Wren brought the ferry in smoothly, secured it, then turned and rowed back. The return trip was equally clean. When she tied up at the northern dock, she was breathing hard, but her expression was calm. Gareth studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Alden. She is adequate, not exceptional, but adequate. He pulled out the documentation. You understand that by signing this, she becomes legally obligated to take your place if you are conscripted in the future. I understand, Wren said before Alden could answer. I agree to the terms. You could be called to serve in dangerous conditions, possibly combat zones. I understand. Gareth shook his head as if baffled by the entire situation, but he handed Wren the papers. Sign here. She signed carefully, her handwriting awkward but legible. Alden signed below her, his hand shaking slightly. Gareth witnessed both signatures and stamped the document with official wax. Your exemption is approved, he told Alden. Your conscription notice is hereby voided. Do not make me regret this. Relief crashed over Alden so powerfully he felt dizzy. Thank you. Thank the orc girl. She is the one who saved you. Gareth gathered the papers. Now get out of my office. I have real work to do. They left quickly before he could change his mind. Outside, in the cool morning air, Alden turned to Wren and found himself suddenly unable to speak. She smiled at him. You are staying. I am staying. He wanted to laugh or cry or both. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. She held up her blistered hands. Though I think I may need a few days to recover. Take all the time you need. Alden felt giddy, almost drunk with relief. I am not going anywhere. They walked back toward the ferry together, neither quite willing to separate yet. At the dock, Wren paused. So what happens now? She asked. It was a good question. They had spent weeks focused entirely on keeping him from being conscripted. Now that crisis was resolved, they had to figure out what came next. I suppose we continue as before, Alden said slowly. You bring your vegetables to trade. I run the ferry. We see each other every few days. That seems insufficient after everything. It does, he agreed. His heart was pounding again. Wren, what I mean is, would you like to, that is. Are you trying to ask me something? Yes, but I am not doing it well. He took a breath. Would you like to have dinner with me, here at my cottage, a proper meal, not just crossing paths at the dock? Her smile was sunlight breaking through clouds. I would like that very much. Tomorrow evening, tomorrow evening. She left, and Alden spent the rest of the day in a daze of relief and anticipation. He cleaned his cottage until it shone. He borrowed spices from the market vendors and planned a meal. He cut flowers from the wild asters growing near the river and put them in a jar on the table. The next evening, Wren arrived just as the sun touched the horizon. She wore a clean tunic and had braided her dark hair. She looked nervous and hopeful and absolutely beautiful. Alden had made stew with the best vegetables he could buy and fresh bread from the baker. They ate slowly, talking more easily now that the pressure of conscription had lifted. Wren told him about her mother, who was improving with the medicine Wren's extra work had bought. Alden told her about his father, who had taught him the river and died peacefully in his sleep 5 years ago. "I think he would have liked you," Alden said. "He always said the best people were the ones who worked hard and did not complain." "I complain sometimes," Wren admitted. "Everyone complains sometimes. It is human." He paused. "Well, you know what I mean." "I do." She smiled at him across the table. "May I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really start carrying the second umbrella, not the philosophical reason, the true one?" Alden considered his answer carefully. "Because watching you cry alone felt wrong. Because I wanted you to know someone saw you and cared. Because from the moment I understood what you were doing, hiding your tears in the rain, I could not stop thinking about you." He met her eyes. "Because even then I was falling for you." Wren set down her spoon. "I thought I was the only one." "You were not. I am still falling," she said quietly. "Every time you look at me like that, every time you do something impossibly kind, every time you make me feel like I matter. You do matter." Alden reached across the table and took her hand. "More than I have words for." They sat together as darkness fell outside, hands clasped, the beginning of something real and substantial settling around them. Over the following weeks, they built their relationship slowly. Wren came to the ferry nearly every day now, sometimes to trade but often just to visit. They shared meals. They talked for hours. They learned each other's quirks and fears and hopes. Alden discovered that Wren had a sharp sense of humor and a gift for mimicking the market vendors. She discovered that he could not sing but hummed constantly while he worked. He learned that she was afraid of thunderstorms but loved the way rain sounded on leaves. She learned that he sometimes had nightmares about the war and woke gasping in the darkness. They kissed for the first time on a cool autumn evening, standing on the dock after Wren had helped him secure the ferry. It was gentle and tentative and perfect. "I am falling for you," Alden whispered against her mouth. "I already fell," Wren replied. But life on the frontier was not easy, and their relationship faced challenges beyond just prejudice. Wren's mother, when she finally learned about Alden, was coldly disapproving. "A human," she said when Wren brought Alden to meet her. "You choose a human after what they did to your father." "Alden is not my father," Wren said firmly. "He is kind and loyal and he cares about me. For now. Wait until his human friends question him. Wait until he has to choose between you and acceptance in his community." Her mother's voice was bitter. "Humans always choose their own kind." "That is not fair," Alden said quietly. "I know your experiences have been painful, but I am not those other people. I choose Wren. I will keep choosing her." Words are easy. Her mother turned away. Proving them is harder. The meeting ended tensely, and Wren was quiet on the walk back to the ferry. "She will come around," Alden said, though he was not certain. "I do not know. She has been hurt too much." Wren leaned against him as they walked. "But I am not going to let her fear control my life. I am choosing you too." They faced smaller prejudices as well. Some of the market vendors stopped trading with Wren when they learned she was courting Alden. A few travelers refused to use the ferry if Wren was present. Old Marin, bless him, vocally supported them, shaming the worst offenders into silence. "People will talk," he told Alden one afternoon. "Let them. You two are good together. That is what matters." "I worry about what this costs her," Alden admitted. "Ask her if she thinks you are worth it." "I bet she says yes," Marin chuckled. "That girl moved mountains to keep you here. A few nasty comments are not going to scare her off." He was right. When Alden voiced his concerns to Wren, she was adamant. "I am not leaving you because some people are small-minded," she said. "I waited too long to find something good. I am not giving it up without a fight." As autumn turned toward winter, they talked about the future, where this relationship might go, what it might become. "I want you to move in with me," Alden said one evening. They were sitting by the fire in his cottage, Wren's head resting on his shoulder. "I know it is fast. I know it will cause talk, but I do not want to keep saying goodbye every evening. I want to wake up with you. I want to build a life together." Wren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want that too, but I cannot leave my mother alone yet. She is still recovering. Then I will come to you, or we find a way to bring her here, or we wait until she is stronger." Alden turned to face her. "I am not giving you an ultimatum. I am just saying I am ready." "Whenever you are ready too, I am here." She kissed him softly. "I love you." It was the first time either of them had said the words aloud. They hung in the air, fragile and powerful. "I love you too," Alden said. "I think I have since the rain and the umbrellas." They made plans slowly. Wren would talk to her mother about eventually moving. They would build a small addition to Alden's cottage, so there was space for her mother if she agreed to come. They would save money and prepare for a future together. It was practical and romantic and terrifying. Then, on the first genuinely cold day of winter, Wren came to the ferry with tears streaming down her face. Not crying in the rain, crying in harsh sunlight. "My mother died," she said. "Last night in her sleep. She was there and then she was gone." Alden caught her as she collapsed, holding her while she sobbed against his chest. All his careful words, all his planned comfort, evaporated. He just held her and let her grieve. They buried Wren's mother in a grove near her cottage 3 days later. It was a small ceremony, just Alden, Wren, and a few orc elders from the distant clan. The elders were coldly formal, clearly disapproving of Alden's presence. But they performed the rites properly and spoke well of the deceased. After they left, Wren stood by the grave alone for a long time. Alden waited at a distance, giving her space. When she finally came to him, her face was dry but her eyes were red. "She never really accepted us," Wren said. "I kept hoping she would, that she would see you were different, but she died still angry at humans, still bitter about my father." "I am sorry." "Me too," she leaned against him. "But I also cannot live my life trying to make up for what others did. She made her choices, I have to make mine." "What do you choose?" "You, us, the life we talked about building." She looked up at him. "I want to move into the cottage. I want to be with you, not someday, now. Are you certain? You just lost your mother, you do not have to rush." "I am not rushing, I am choosing." Her voice was firm. "I have spent too much of my life hiding and waiting. No more. I love you, I want a life with you. If you still want that, I am ready." Alden kissed her there beside her mother's grave, a promise sealed in grief and hope. "I want that more than anything." Wren moved into the cottage the following week. It was strange at first, learning to share space, negotiating routines. But it was also wonderful. Waking up together, sharing meals, working side by side during the day, Alden on the ferry and Wren tending a new garden plot near the cottage. The winter was hard, but they faced it together. When storms made the river too dangerous to cross, they huddled by the fire and told stories. When Wren had nightmares about her mother, Alden held her until she calmed. When Alden's war memories resurfaced, Wren sat with him in the darkness and talked him through the panic. They were building something strong, something real. As winter softened toward spring, Alden began thinking about the future in more permanent terms. He loved Wren. He wanted to spend his life with her, which meant he needed to make that official. He commissioned a ring from the blacksmith in the village. Simple silver with a small green stone the color of Wren's skin. It cost most of his winter savings, but it was perfect. He planned to propose on a clear day, somewhere beautiful and meaningful. Maybe by the river at sunset. Maybe in the garden. Wren was already planning for spring. But then the rain came. It was a gentle spring rain, warm and soft. Wren stood at the cottage window watching it fall, her expression distant. "What are you thinking?" Alden asked. "About the rain. How I used to wait for it so I could cry." She smiled faintly. "How you ruined that with your umbrellas." "I have no regrets about the umbrellas, neither do I." She turned to face him. "Do you remember what you said that first time you held the umbrella over me, that I should not have to wait for storms?" "I remember. You were right." "About so many things." She crossed to him. "You saw me when I was trying to be invisible. You cared when I thought no one did. You carried 2 umbrellas like it was the most natural thing in the world." "It was natural. You mattered. You still matter." Alden took her hands. "Wren, I have been planning this elaborate proposal. The perfect moment, the perfect words. But standing here with you, watching the rain we do not have to hide in anymore, this feels like the right time." He pulled the ring from his pocket and knelt. Wren's eyes widened. "I love you," Alden said. "I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you refuse to let the world make you small. I love that you moved mountains to keep me here. I love building a life with you." He held up the ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Wren's cheeks. Happy tears falling freely in the light. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and she pulled him up to kiss her. They held each other as rain pattered against the windows, no longer a cover for grief but a witness to joy. "I am crying," Wren said with a wet laugh. "In the open, and it counts." "It counts," Alden agreed. They married 2 months later in late spring. It was a small ceremony, just old Maren and a few friends from the crossing. The river warden, Gareth, performed the service with his usual bored efficiency, but even he smiled when Alden kissed his bride. Wren wore a simple dress the color of cream, with wild flowers in her hair. Alden wore his best shirt and could not stop grinning. They spoke their vows standing on the ferry dock with the Grey Run flowing behind them. "I promise to carry umbrellas," Alden said, "both literal and metaphorical. To see you when you feel invisible, and to stand with you when things are hard." "I promise to be stubborn," Wren replied, smiling through tears. "To fight for us the way you fought for me, to build a life where neither of us has to hide." They exchanged rings. Maren produced a bottle of surprisingly good wine. And as the sun set over the river, turning the water gold, Wren cried openly, tears of joy, falling in clear evening light, tears that counted. Life on the ferry crossing settled into a good rhythm after the wedding. Alden ran the ferry, Wren tended their expanding garden. They saved money slowly, dreaming of eventual improvements to the cottage. Maybe a second room. Maybe a proper workshop for Alden to repair ferry equipment. The prejudice did not disappear. Some people still looked at them sideways, still muttered about interspecies marriages. But many more accepted them. The vendors who saw Wren's hard work. The travelers who appreciated Alden's reliable service. The neighbors who judged them by their actions rather than their species. Old Maren became something like family, eating dinner with them weekly and telling long, rambling stories about his merchant days. He brought gifts for no reason, claimed Wren made the best bread in the valley, and made sure everyone knew he had helped keep Alden at the crossing. "You two are my success story," he said one evening, slightly drunk on Alden's homemade cider. "Proof that stubbornness and loyalty beat prejudice every time." "We are your success story," Wren teased. "I thought we did all the work." "You did the work. I provided crucial financial backing." He raised his cup. "That makes me a patron of true love. I am taking credit." They laughed, and the evening continued warm and easy. A year after their wedding, on a rainy afternoon, Wren stood at the cottage window watching the storm. Alden came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Remembering old times?" he asked. "A little." She leaned back against him. "Thinking about how much has changed. How I used to cry in the rain because it was the only safe place, and now rain just makes me think of you and umbrellas." "I still have both umbrellas," Alden said. "Stored in the ferry equipment box." "I know, I saw them last week." She turned in his arms. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not noticed? If you had just let me cry in peace?" "I try not to. It would have been a lonelier life. For both of us." She kissed him softly. "I am glad you noticed. I am glad you cared enough to carry two umbrellas like a strange, wonderful man. I am glad you let me." He rested his forehead against hers. "I am glad you stayed stubborn until we figured this out." "I am still stubborn. You are stuck with that. Good. I like you stubborn." They stood together watching the rain. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way and built something strong enough to weather any storm. 2 years into their marriage, on a clear spring morning, Wren realized she was pregnant. She waited until evening to tell Alden, wanting the moment to be perfect. He came home tired from a busy day on the ferry, smelling of river water and sun. Wren had made his favorite meal and set the table carefully. "What is the occasion?" Alden asked, noticing the effort. "Sit down, I have news." He sat, suddenly alert. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Very good news." She took his hands across the table. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment Alden just stared. Then a grin spread across his face so wide it looked almost painful. "Truly, truly. I am about 2 months along, I think." He stood and pulled her up, spinning her around carefully before kissing her thoroughly. "A baby. We are having a baby. We are. I am going to be a father." He looked dazed. "I need to build a cradle, and we need another room on the cottage. And we should save more money. And what if I am terrible at this? You are going to be wonderful." Wren cupped his face. "You carried 2 umbrellas for a crying orc girl. You will be a wonderful father." Over the following months, they prepared for the baby with a mix of excitement and terror. Alden built a beautiful cradle from river oak. Wren sewed tiny clothes. They argued gently about names and made long lists of things they needed. The pregnancy was not easy. Wren was sick frequently in the early months and exhausted in the later ones. Alden took over more of the household work, determined to make things easier. Old Marin hired a girl from the village to help with the garden, claiming he wanted the extra vegetables, but everyone knew it was charity. Wren's clan, hearing about the pregnancy, sent a midwife. The woman was gruff and disapproving but competent. She taught Alden what to expect during the birth and made sure Wren was healthy. "Half-human babies are rare," the midwife told them, "but they usually take after the mother more than the father. Expect a child that looks orc but with some human features." "We do not care what the child looks like," Wren said firmly, "as long as it is healthy." The midwife snorted. "You say that now. Wait until it arrives." The baby came on a hot summer night, arriving with dramatic speed after hours of labor. Alden held Wren's hand through the whole ordeal, feeling useless and terrified. When the baby finally emerged, crying lustily, he nearly collapsed with relief. "A boy," the midwife announced, cleaning the baby efficiently. healthy lungs, good color. She handed the baby to Wren, who cradled him with tears streaming down her face. The baby had green skin like his mother and small tusks already visible. But his eyes were brown like Alden's and his ears were less pointed than a full-blooded orc. "He is perfect," Wren whispered. Alden leaned over to look at his son, feeling a wave of love so powerful it nearly knocked him over. "He is. What should we name him?" They had debated names for months. Now, looking at their son, the choice seemed obvious. "Ivan," Wren said, "after your father's middle name, Ivan Whitmore." "Ivan," Alden repeated softly. "Welcome to the world, little one." The baby calmed at his voice, blinking up at them with unfocused eyes. Alden carefully took him, marveling at how small and warm he was. "Hello, Ivan. I am your father. That is your mother. We are going to love you fiercely and raise you well and teach you about rivers and gardens and carrying umbrellas when it matters." He looked at Wren. "He is going to be so loved." "He already is," Wren said, smiling through exhausted tears. The midwife left at dawn, satisfied that both mother and child were stable. Old Marin arrived mid-morning with food and gifts, cooing over the baby with surprising tenderness. "He has your stubbornness," he told Wren. "I can see it already. He is 1 day old. How can you possibly see stubbornness? I am an excellent judge of character." Marin gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "He is going to be a good one, I can tell." Over the following weeks they adjusted to life with an infant. The sleepless nights and constant feedings and overwhelming love. Ivan was a relatively easy baby, alert and curious, calming quickly when held. He seemed to love the sound of the river, falling asleep whenever Alden carried him to the ferry dock. "He has river water in his blood," Alden said one evening, rocking Ivan gently. "Just like his grandfather." Wren watched them from the cottage door, her heart full. This life, this family, this impossible, beautiful thing they had built together. It had started with tears hidden in rain and umbrellas carried in kindness. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. Ivan grew quickly, reaching milestones that filled his parents with pride and terror. His first smile, his first tooth, his first word, which was "wah" for water. He toddled around the ferry dock with fearless determination, requiring constant supervision so he did not tumble into the river. When Ivan was 2, Wren became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. They welcomed a second son, Yale, in the spring. He had his mother's pointed ears and his father's smile, and he cried with impressive volume. "2 boys," Alden said, holding Yale while Ivan climbed on his lap. "We are outnumbered." "You love it," Wren said accurately. He did. He loved the chaos and the noise and the constant motion. He loved teaching Ivan to read the river's current and showing Yale how to splash in the shallows. He loved watching Wren mother their children with fierce tenderness. They added 2 more rooms to the cottage, creating space for their growing family. Old Marin taught Ivan to count using river stones. The market vendors donated old clothes and toys. The community, slowly, began to embrace them fully. When Ivan was 5 and Yale was 3, Ivan asked the question they had been expecting. "Papa, why do I look different from you?" They were at the ferry dock, Ivan helping Alden coil ropes. Alden glanced at Wren, who nodded encouragement. "Because your mother is an orc and I am human," Alden said simply. "You have the best parts of both of us." Tommy from the village said I am a half-breed. He said it like it was bad. Alden's jaw tightened. Tommy is repeating what he heard from adults who do not know better. Being part orc and part human is not bad. It is just who you are. But why do some people think it is bad? Because people fear what they do not understand. Because some humans and some orcs have hurt each other in the past, and it is easier to keep hating than to try to understand. Alden knelt down to Ivan's level. But your mother and I love each other, and we love you and your brother, and that is what matters, not what Tommy says, not what anyone says. Ivan considered this seriously. I like being part of both. Good, because you are perfect exactly as you are. Ivan smiled and went back to coiling rope. Crisis averted, at least for now. That evening, Alden held Wren close in bed, listening to the river and their son's soft breathing from the next room. He is going to face prejudice, Wren said quietly. Both of them are. People who will not accept them because they are mixed, I know, but they will also have us, and they will have each other. Alden kissed her forehead. We will teach them to be strong and kind, to carry metaphorical umbrellas for people who need them. They will be fine. You sound very confident. I am. They are our sons. They are going to be amazing. Wren smiled in the darkness. You are a good father. I learned from a good mother. They lay together in comfortable silence, two people who had beaten impossible odds to build an impossible life. They had weathered prejudice and conscription and grief. They had chosen each other again and again, and they had created a family rooted in love rather than fear. The years continued to pass in the good rhythm they had established. Ivan and Yale grew into smart, capable boys who helped with the ferry and the garden. They learned to read from their father and to plant from their mother. They swam in the Grey Run and played with the village children, accepted by most if not all. Alden continued to run the ferry, his reputation growing. People came from distant villages specifically to use his crossing, knowing it was safe and reliable. Wren's garden became famous locally, her vegetables sought after for their quality. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable. More importantly, they were happy. Old Marin passed away peacefully when Ivan was 10, leaving a small inheritance that Alden and Wren used to finally build the workshop Alden had always wanted. It was bittersweet, but fitting. Marin's last gift helping them continue to build their life. On a rainy afternoon when Ivan was 12 and Yale was 10, Alden found Wren standing at the cottage window watching the storm. It was a familiar scene, played out hundreds of times over the years. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About rain," she said. "About a girl who cried alone and thought no one saw, about a man strange enough to carry 2 umbrellas. I still have those umbrellas. I know." She turned in his arms. "Do you ever regret it? Staying here, tying your life to mine? You could have served your conscription and come back to an easier life. A human wife, no mixed children to defend." "Never." Alden said the word firmly. "Not once, not even for a moment, truly, truly." "Wren, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Our children are the best thing we ever made together. This life is exactly what I want." He cupped her face gently. "I would make the same choices again in a heartbeat." Tears slipped down her cheeks. Happy tears, falling in the afternoon light with rain pattering outside. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, always." They kissed, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had created, the love that had started with something as simple and profound as carrying an umbrella for a crying girl in the rain. Outside, the storm continued. Inside, everything was warm and safe and exactly right. The rain fell and it counted. Every drop, every moment, every choice that had brought them here, it all counted. And it was good. Years later, when Alden and Wren were old and gray and their sons had families of their own, they still lived by the ferry crossing. Ivan had taken over running the ferry, having learned the river as well as his father. Yale had become a skilled carpenter, building boats and homes throughout the valley. Both men had married. Ivan to a kind human woman, and Yale to a fierce orc girl who reminded everyone of Wren in her youth. They brought grandchildren to visit, a chaotic mix of species and personalities that filled the cottage with noise and love. On a quiet evening, Alden and Wren sat on their porch watching the sun set over the gray run. Alden's hair was white, Wren's green skin lined with age. But they still held hands like young lovers. "You remember the first time you saw me crying?" Wren asked. "Of course. You were standing at the dock in the rain trying to hide." Alden smiled. "I thought you were just cold until I saw your shoulders shaking. I was so careful about it. I thought no one noticed. I noticed. I could not stop noticing." He squeezed her hand gently. "Best thing I ever did carrying that second umbrella. Best thing I ever did was letting you." Wren leaned her head on his shoulder. "We built something good, did we not? We built something amazing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the river flow and the sky darken. Their life together had not always been easy, but it had been real and true and full of love. From inside the cottage came the sound of their grandchildren playing, supervised by Ivan and his wife. Happy shrieks and laughter echoed across the water. "They will never have to hide their tears," Wren said softly. "No," Alden agreed. "They will never have to wait for rain to feel safe enough to cry. We made sure of that. We did." The first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The river sang its eternal song. And two people who had found each other in rain and tears and stubborn determination sat together, grateful for every moment, every choice, every umbrella carried in kindness. Their love story had started with a simple act of noticing, of caring enough to shelter someone who thought herself invisible. It had grown into a life, a family, a legacy. And when the rain came now, falling softly on the cottage roof, neither of them cried. They just held hands and remembered when rain meant hiding before they found each other and learned that some things were too good to hide. Some things needed to be seen and acknowledged and celebrated. Some things counted, rain or shine. And love, real love, counted most of all.